All right, thank you, committee. We will come to order, and as I mentioned, mostly around the table, we'll work through some of the bills that we have and see how far we can make it. But we'll spend a little time as we bring each bill up, just bringing it back to mind and knowing that may have been a while since you thought about each of these. I will take them in the order that is on the sheet around the table. But the first one is House Bill 2510. I will have the reviser give an overview before we even make the motion, just to get it on the table, and then I'll ask for the wishes of the committee. As a high-level reminder, this made some changes to the general fund requirements, and we had some testimony from Chris Swickard from Security Benefit, and he gave us some testimony that compared some of the general fund requirements between Kansas and some other select states in his testimony. But with that, if the reviser would give us an overview of 2510.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee. House Bill 2510 was the bill that updated certain investment limitation requirements to provide increased investment options for Kansas domiciled life insurance companies that were investing in equity interests and preferred stock. It amended KSA 40-2B06 and 40-2B07. KSA 40-2B06 was the statute that pertained to investments in preferred stock. And under current law, a Kansas domiciled life insurance company can invest up to 25% of its admitted assets in the preferred stocks of or stocks guaranteed by a domestic or an American corporation or a Canadian corporation. The life insurance company's admitted assets are based upon the company's last annual report that was filed with the commissioner or a more recent quarterly financial statement. And it places current law in subsections A through E of the statute are all requirements that current law places on any of the potential investments. House Bill 2510 would eliminate those requirements. KSA 40-2B07 is section 2 of the bill, and that pertains to investments in equity interests. Under current law, a life insurance company, Kansas Citus Life Insurance Company, may invest up to 15% of its admitted assets in the equity interests of an American or Canadian business entity. Similarly to KSA 40-2B06, the life insurance company's admitted assets are based upon the company's last annual report as filed with the commissioner or a more recent quarterly financial statement filed within 45 days of the end of the quarter to which the statement pertained. Subsections A through G placed requirements on any potential investment made by such a life insurance company. 2510 would raise the admitted asset investment limit from 15 to 20%, and it would remove the requirements in subsections A through D. And then the exemption to subsection B and D that is provided in subsection G has also been removed. And I can stand for questions.
Committee, are there questions for the reviser? Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the reviser, I have a question. In the bill brief, in the second paragraph, it refers to a Kansas, is it a site-used life insurance company? Is that the other name for a domiciled company?
Essentially, you can use the terms interchangeably.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Representative Neighbor.
If there are no more questions, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we move House Bill 2510 favorably for passage. I've had my mask on too long.
Thank you for the motion, seconded by Representative Croft. Discussion on the motion. Representative Riley.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I've been looking at this since we've had this hearing, and so I don't want it to affect anyone else on this committee's opinion, but I still think this is stretching the life insurance part of this, and so I'm going to be voting no. And so that's just my own personal opinion.
Thank you, Representative. Other questions, comments, discussion? So Representative Riley has his finger on what is happening with it in terms of changing those investment requirements, and it does make it somewhat easier. I think the proponent had an appendix in his testimony that showed some of the hurdles that we jumped through on the preferred stocks as well as the equities that would be more consistent with other states, and some things that I'm not sure added a lot of value in the hurdles that we had. The other piece, when I first hear that I'm going to go from 15 to 20% in equity interests in the general fund, I like the previous speaker would say, that is riskier. In this particular case, I actually think it may be different than that, in that if I start with a 100% bond portfolio and I shift a little bit to equities, I increase the return because there's a higher return on the stock component, and I actually reduce the risk ever so modestly because all my eggs aren't in one basket and I don't just have interest rate risk. And as you look at the trade-off between those, typically you continue to reduce risk depending on exactly which bond and stock category. And I have some experts in the audience, not on this bill, that could probably tell me exactly where that point changes, but probably even up to 30% in the stock market to reduce that if you're just looking at return and risk, and depending on the time frame and a whole bunch of other scenarios that are there. Given the time frame for an annuity company, I think that those changes are prudent. I think the companies that would choose to make the changes will also be looking at their risk, and providing that degree of flexibility, in my opinion, will be a good thing for both the company from a competitive standpoint and the contract holders who are interested in the general fund having the highest return it can achieve with minimal risk. And I should probably stop talking, but that is my perspective, and Representative Riley.
And I will remind the chairman that the insurance commissioner was good with this as far as they are going to be looking over their shoulder to make sure that they're still solvent.
So nonetheless, I thank the representative for bringing up the point so that I could talk ad nauseum. So that is great. Is there anyone else with a question or comment on the topic? If there are no further questions, Representative, you may close on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With all the good discussion we just had, I again move my motion to pass House Bill 2510 favorably.
For the motion by Representative Neighbor to pass 2510 favorable, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. Representative Riley would like his no recorded on record. Anyone else that would like their, well, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Anyone else like a vote recorded? Seeing none, thank you, committee. Our next item of business would be House Bill 2547. This also dealt with setting up insurance companies and general funds, and if the reviser would give us an overview of 2547.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2547 would allow for the creation of a technology-enabled fiduciary financial institution, or a TEFI insurance company, and this would be within the Captive Insurance Act, KSA 40-4301 at SEEK. The bill would add a new section to the Captive Insurance Act establishing the TEFI insurance companies. Section 1 of the bill establishes the requirements for the TEFI insurance company operations, including authorizing the company to provide contracts of suretyship or credit insurance when the obligee or insured is an affiliated TEFI, an affiliated FinFin trust, or any other affiliated company of the TEFI. It also provides for types of risks for which the TEFI insurance company may insure against, list events that constitute fortuitous events for the purpose of any policy or product offered by the company as insurance, exempting the company from the requirement to use the word captive in the insurance company's name if the TEFI insurance company uses instead any of the following: technology-enabled fiduciary financial institution insurance company, or TEFI insurance company, Kansas e-commerce FinFin insurance company, or KEFI. The TEFI insurance company also would have its principal place of business in the same or shared office premises with an affiliated TEFI or other TEFI insurance company. Allows any person to serve on the board of an affiliated TEFI or to also serve on the board of the insurance company and fulfill the Kansas residency requirements for both the Captive Insurance Act and the TEFI Act. Allows a TEFI insurance company to enter into service contracts with other TEFI insurance companies, affiliated TEFIs, or other affiliates. Provides requirements and procedures for TEFI insurance companies that issue payment-in-kind policies, allowing any insurance company, regardless of the jurisdiction, that is permitted to hold equity interest in an affiliated TEFI to utilize such equity interest as in-kind assets when they issue those payment-in-kind policies, and does not require any more than one employee in the state to provide services for a TEFI insurance company or to facilitate the examinations under the Captive Insurance Act. Considering TEFI insurance company to be an insurance company and to have its primary and predominant business activity the writing of insurance and reinsuring of risks, and shall be subject to the supervision of the Commissioner of Insurance. It does allow for a policy provision within those TEFI insurance policies to govern, that the policy would be governed by and construed in accordance with Kansas law, and that would be fully enforceable. It allows a forum selection provision within that TEFI policy to require any suit or action to be brought either in Kansas State Court or the United States District Court for the District of Kansas, and such policy provision would be fully enforceable. And providing that payment in-kind policies issued to a qualified policyholder shall be fully enforceable. And then it provides for some construction of the of the act and how it should be construed. Section 2 amends the definitions section of the Captive Insurance Act to add definitions relating to TEFIs and TEFI insurance companies and those payment-in-kind policies and in-kind assets. Section 3 would permit a TEFI insurance company to provide contracts of suretyship and credit insurance as an exception to the general prohibition against captive insurance companies providing surety services. This also changes the renewal date for a TEFI insurance company to the later of March 1 or the maturity date of the last payment-in-kind asset held by the company, and it further amends the statute to provide protections for privacy of qualified policyholders and those who have established an affiliated FIN trust in court proceedings. Section 4 would be that exemption from the use of the word captive in the TEFI insurance company name if they comply with the naming requirements I mentioned in Section 1. And then Section 5 would allow the TEFI insurance company to hold in-kind assets, and such in-kind assets required to be held shall be counted as part of the reserves, capital, and surplus of the TEFI insurance company, and then allow the company to, is permitted to hold equity interest in an affiliated TEFI. And then Section 6 is just a kind of a conforming amendment to now include Section 1 as part of the Captive Insurance Act, and the effective date of the bill was publication in the Register. I can stand for, take any questions.
So thanks. Another simple bill, kind of like risk-based capital, right? Yeah, so thank you for the thorough explanation. I think we all have our head around what topic we are on now and what we have heard, so thank you for the overview. Representative Croft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just wanted to address some things. I know we had some side conversations, so I just want to maybe clarify some. So Beneficient has a captive insurance company, just like many businesses in this and many other industries. They have that today. This enables them to acquire insurance at approximately 1/3 the cost and then pass that savings on to their customers. Beneficient has been in the captive insurance business for approximately 20 years. Didn't realize that until we started asking questions, and I appreciate the representative for doing that. Their company is currently London-based, and the IRS has changed its tax codes, which now they want to actually locate it in the continental United States. So with this change, Beneficient will be able to put that here in Kansas, as with like many other organizations like them. And I think there's 6 or 7 other organizations that might look to relocate here. What it does is it brings more jobs to Kansas, and it brings some oversight for us to firmly establish Kansas as a lead in the TEFI marketplace. So I just wanted to highlight that because I know there were questions you asked me, and I went out and researched it and wanted to just address it to everybody, at least what I found. It doesn't make me an expert on it, just want to address that. But with that, Mr. Chairman, is it okay to go ahead? I move that the committee recommend House Bill 2547 favorably for passage.
Second.
Thank you, Representative. Seconded by Representative Neighbor. And we'll move into discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I do have a technical amendment, if that's okay. It is an amendment that was agreed to and worked with the company beneficent and the insurance commissioner. They're working together to make this amendment. So,
Thank you. We will distribute it, and if the revisor will review it with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is the first amendment here proposed in the balloon is purely a technical amendment on page 2. This is just in line 17 where I just inadvertently used the wrong terminology, then forgot to include fiduciary financial institution insurance company as it is throughout the rest of the bill. So that's just clarifying the terminology and the name to be consistent. And then on page 5 of the amendment, this is relating to the financial statements. This is just, instead of using the term profit and loss financial statement, it now is such amount shall be reported included in statutory financial statements. So just kind of a little bit of a technical cleanup there, suggested by the insurance department. And then page 6, this would indicate a couple new subsections there. Just say a technology-enabled fiduciary financial institution insurance company shall be permitted, subject to compliance with Kansas law, to do business in any other state or territory of the United States. So this would allow them to, if they're a Kansas company, but to also take their business and go into other states of the United States. And then also that the technology-enabled fiduciary financial institution policy shall respect the form, treatment, and character of such affiliated FIDFIN trust or FIDFIN transactions under the laws of Kansas, notwithstanding the treatment or characterization under generally accepted accounting principles or for tax purposes. And this is similar language as was in the original TEFI Act as regarding to the tax treatment and the form and character of those statements. So it just kind of is conforming to the TEFI Act as well.
Thank you for the overview. Are there questions for the revisor? Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the bill that we heard today were to be enacted as a law about making permanent the TEFI, the pilot program, would we have to again revise this to update statutes, or is it still referring to the same statute?
No, it's still the same statute. Yeah, that's just the conditional charter that was issued under the current TEFI Act would be a permanent charter under the bill. So, but it doesn't change the underlying TEFI Act. No.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Riley.
So, Vice Chair, are you making a motion on this? Because if that's true, I will second that.
Thank you. We'll jump to that point. Motion by Representative Croft to amend, seconded by Representative Riley. Are there further questions for the revisor? If not, are there questions or discussion on the amendment? And if no discussion, Representative, you may close.
I close.
Heard the motion by Representative Croft to amend. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it, and the amendment passes. Back on the bill, further discussion on 2547 or questions. Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question. Being new to the committee and new to the legislature and as a layman, I don't understand perhaps the reasoning why captive is being exempted from a TEFI insurance company. Could someone provide me with information or the distinction why that is being exempted? The word captive?
And I'm not sure I can get to where it is being exempted. Is that clear to the revisor?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, are you speaking to the exempting them from the name, using the word captive in their name?
Yes, the name, yeah.
I mean, I can't really speak to why that is, but it is true that they would not have to use the word captive in the name, but they would have to use those other terminologies that are in Section 1, the KEFI or the Kansas e-commerce, FitFin, or the technology-enabled fiduciary financial institution insurance company. I mean, but yes, it does not. But
So if we may step out of protocol from committee discussion at this point, we may have expertise in the audience if the committee is willing to accept that from either the insurance department or our experts at Beneficient.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be back. The reason to... I think I'm on. There we go. All right, thank you for having us back. The reason to have a different title on the name of the company is that the company and the TEFI will be banding together. They're under one holding company. The risk stays within the captive family of all the affiliated families. The TEFI itself has a larger balance sheet and a bigger balance sheet, and it's recognized in the reinsurance market. So if we can leverage off of the TEFI name without having the captive, it puts you into a different purchasing group within the reinsurance businesses. And that's where your cost savings come from. You're able to cover the same amount of risk at a third to even less cost by the great big global reinsurance companies. And captive will switch you into a different group when you use that name inside those reinsurance companies. So we get a better pricing if we go in under the TEFI name. It is truly just optics as to where your risk gets underwritten by the groups and priced. Same risk, and it's the same type of quality of rating of the underlying reinsurance companies. And on that part, our commissioner has the authority over approving your reinsurance towers that you put in place. So our job is to go get the best possible price, best possible rating from the best possible reinsurance companies and put that into the insurance commissioner's office and saying, is this okay? And then they get to have supervision and regulatory authority over it.
Mr. Chairman, if I have one more. So would the policyholders still be captive in a relationship, but it's just kind of a technical, like you'd mentioned?
Right.
Semantic.
That's correct.
Change.
Yeah, it's when we go to reinsure the packages of our group of families. And then it's all still in the family and under the name. But we'd rather go in and not have the name captive when we're going into the reinsurance underwriting. These are like great big bake-offs when you have people come in and compete to provide you the coverage. And so you want to get the right underwriters at the highest ratings that can cover you at the lowest possible cost. And it's just different groups of people doing the exact same thing, and they have different pricing schedules.
Thank you very much for that information. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
So further questions or discussion or more clarification desired? Representative Miller.
I'm assuming by the insurance department's silence on those comments that they have no dispute with what we were told.
I am open to them making that comment if they are willing.
Correct.
Thank you, by Lee Modisett. Appreciate you joining us in committee. You may.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The one clarifying comment that I did want to make is that within this portion of the bill, it differentiates the TEFI captive insurance products from the captive insurance companies that we have that are under the governance of the Kansas Captive Insurance Act themselves. So when you see that language that it exempts them from having to use the phrase captive insurance, that is a requirement that exists currently for the other Captive Insurance Act. So that I think you're seeing that term exempt, and not necessarily, it's not exempting it from this bill at all, but it's exempting it from the requirement that exists under the Captive Insurance Act otherwise.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing no further questions or discussion on the bill of House Bill 2547, Representative Croft, you may close or restate the motion to pass as amended.
Mr. Chair, thank you. This is an excellent opportunity for the state of Kansas. Mr. Chairman, with that, I renew my motion for the committee to favorably pass House Bill 2547 as amended.
Seconded again by Representative Riley. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it, and motion passes. Thank you, committee. Our next item of business, House Bill 2561, a bill transferring $1 billion to the Kansas Public Employees Retirement Fund. And if we may have an overview from the reviser again, Bill 2561.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill would transfer $1 billion during fiscal year 2022, so in the current fiscal year, from the State General Fund to the Kansas Public Employees Retirement Fund, also known as the Keepers Trust Fund. And of that $1 billion, the first 253.8 or 0.9 or so of such transfer would be for the purpose of making the full payment for those reduced employer contributions from the Keepers School Group that were done in fiscal years 2017 and 2019 when there were some budget constraints. The bill also amends KSA 744920, that's the Keepers Employer Contribution Statute, the strike language that requires additional level dollar employer contribution payments over 20 years to pay the actuarial cost of the reduction of those employer contributions that were made in fiscal year 2017 and fiscal year 2019. These additional level dollar contributions are not going to be necessary due to the transfer of the $253.9 million made pursuant to Section 1 of the bill. That just has the full payment, sort of an accelerate payment, so you don't have to do that 20-year level dollar payment. It's all going to be paid off and sort of trued up now from those 2017, 2019 reductions. And in order to make that transfer during fiscal year 2022, the bill does become effective upon publication in the Register.
So thank you. Committee questions? Discussions or wishes of the committee? Representative Croft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee recommend House Bill 2561 favorably for passage.
Seconded by Representative Topliker. As we move into discussion on this one, I'll turn that back on. I do have an amendment. Does anyone else have an amendment they would like to offer before I get started? All right, I'll start with mine if the reviser will distribute it. This amendment is intended to deal with what we talked about with the budget director, where it would send the 253.9 through the Department of Education. And that's the direction that it would go, and I'll let the reviser explain how it actually works.
All right, as the amendment's being passed out here, I'll just kind of jump in. This would then sort of kind of split that $1 billion, what was going to just be a revenue transfer straight from SGF to the trust fund. This would now keep that $746 million would still be as a revenue transfer from the state general fund to the trust fund, and then insert the $253 million to pay off the layering payments, those level dollar payments. That would actually be an appropriation through the Department of Education, so that would actually show up as a SGF spending from the Department of Education for education purposes, as the budget director had indicated in his testimony.
So thank you. One question that I would have, and I might even look to Capers on whether I'm thinking correctly, on the Section 2 that directs the Department of Education that the money goes there, is there anything that specifies that comes back as a Capers payment? Is that necessary? Am I belt and suspenders to think we sent it there for that purpose? Are we clear that it then goes to Capers after it goes there? And a question I should have asked you when I first went over it.
Mr. Chairman, yes, this would go through, because right now, it's the employer contributions from this, the state pays the employer contributions for the schools, the school districts, and that money goes through the Department of Education from appropriations. The department distributes it out to the school districts, and then it hits their accounting systems, it bounces back and remitted to CAPERS. And I'll let Alan fill in on any of the blanks.
So thank you, and I do get how it goes there. I just didn't know if we needed to specify that the payment going out did have to take that next step. If CAPERS has an opinion on that, I would welcome any thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you're correct. The intent is clear that the money would go to the Department of Ed for those layering payments. There isn't any specific language, not that they would hold on to it, but there's no specific language that says, and then the Department of Ed shall forward it on to CAPERS. I think they know the intent. Sometimes our friendly accountants in the State Department of Administration Accounts and Reports, sometimes as they say, okay, before that payment gets made, where's the statutory language that says Department of Ed, you send that to CAPERS. We know it went to Department of Ed for CAPERS, but there's not a directive for them to forward it on, although I trust them, I hope they would, but sometimes those accountants get kind of nervous about not seeing direction in black and white there.
So thank you. I believe we had some questions, Representative Riley and then Proctor.
So Alan, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Alan, is there any historical precedent for doing this kind of a transfer before?
Yes, there was a $115 million payment before, and that was handled just previously to make up for some missed employer contributions, and that was just handled as a revenue transfer. Just came right from the general fund to CAPERS. It didn't go through the Department of Ed. I mean, I guess it's been handled both ways, I guess, to answer your question specifically. I think the last time was that $115 million, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and that was just a direct revenue transfer. That one they just sent it direct out of the general fund directly to CAPERS that time, but not through the Department of Ed.
So
I think it's been handled both ways through time.
Well, it's a good point, and I'll get to the next question, but the layering payments we haven't dealt with a number of times, and we really can go either way. We're going to accomplish the same thing. Do we want it to go through the Department of Education as part of that maintenance? Do we not? And if we do, how do we just make sure it's clear? So that's where we are. Thanks for the questions to Representative Proctor and then Garber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You said something that made my heart stop, and I want to make sure I understood it correctly. Were you saying that there's nothing in this amendment that compels the Department of Education to actually use this money for CAPERS? We're just trusting that they're going to execute our intent?
If I may, and the reviser may have some thoughts too, I believe the answer would be yes. Again, a lot of times, the intent's there, the account's labeled for CAPERS, payoff layering payments, so the intent is very clear. This is almost, in my mind, this part is almost a technical sort of accounting thing. That last step that says, okay, Department of Ed, send it to CAPERS, and language, just a sentence in here or two would direct them to do that. So the auditors / accountants that handle those kinds of things would say, okay, yes, send it over there.
Okay. So if I could follow up, Mr. Chair, with the reviser, is it possible to add additional language if we get this to the floor that would make it undeniably clear with, or is there something that we could do conceptually as an amendment to this amendment that would make it undeniable that they have to do that?
So thank you, Representative, and I think we're thinking the same thing, and when we make the motion for this amendment, if we choose to go this way, we might ask for some clarification for conceptual language and a license to the revisor, just to make sure that second step is clear in case it is not. So thank you for the question. Representative Garber and then Toplicker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I think you answered my question a while ago when you spoke, but this is our maintenance of effort. We're using a part of this $1 billion as our maintenance of effort for Capers. Is that, I mean, I'm trying to figure this out. Why are we going to the Department of Ed and then to Capers?
Right.
Is that?
So it would be that it's not currently a required maintenance of effort. We are meeting that. So it is an additional payment that is being made. Does it matter that we get credit for it going to education since that's where it is or not? Can go either way. Just to share a little further, I think the Senate bill goes direct. So this would also give us a conference topic in the future to say, did we really want to run it through that or do we just want to go direct anyway? So this is kind of a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other option for us.
Okay, thank you.
So Representative Toplicker and then Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, in the balloon box for section 2, that number in there, is that the fund number that this money is going into? Where it says the Department of Education A, that paragraph there in the box, that number listed after Capers layering payment. That's the, is that the fund number that it is going into? Okay. And so it is, right? That's what we've determined.
If the revisor or Capers can clarify that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that would be the account number would be within the state general fund, but it would be, yeah, I believe they use that within the accounting system to track the specific line item, budget item.
And that number has to do with specifically with the Capers fund for the Department of Education, correct? So we know that's where the money is directed. The other question is, can't we just put a proviso statement in the appropriations bill that says that we did this or that we are doing it? That'd be a fairly simple thing to do.
It could be another route that we would handle it ultimately as we look at how we want to credit the money, which is all we're doing at this point. We're still looking at the same dollars and doing the same thing. It's which path to take to get there. So thank you for the clarifications. Further questions, Representative Toplicker at the moment. Representative Proctor and then Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This might be a question for you, sir. I'm trying to recall this very in-depth testimony that we had. So the point of doing this is so we get quote unquote credit for having paid into the Department of Education if like Gannon should be reopened or something like that, and we had to show our work that we were meeting the requirements of the Supreme Court's decision. Is that the purpose?
I'm not sure exactly when or how that would come into question, if it would have to do with a suit subsequent to Gannon or not, but it could be called into question if maintenance of effort would be measured in some similar way. And so that was the question, and I'd say interesting to note that that was also the position of the budget director and the governor to potentially measure it that way.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So thank you. Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this also reduces our yearly interest payments by doing this, because this was 15 and 17 or 17 and 19. Anyway, for a number of years, we delayed those payments, and they have to be made. Well, if we make them in this fashion through the Department of Ed, because the budget director asked for it to be that way, just for clean, transparent bookkeeping, At that point, it takes those off the books. And it saves, I believe, how many millions? Do you know? 25? Yeah. And so that's a huge deduction. And so in future years, we won't have that extra interest because it will be paid and clean for that. So I think it's important that the budget director asked for it to be done for transparency and to be able to show a direct line as to where it went. And I would dare say schools want that covered too. It's only to their benefit for their teachers and retirees. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So thank you. And I think that was another important piece of how he saw the accounting piece lining up right next to each other. Either way, we'll extinguish the debt and handle the interest costs, which we were all in happy agreement on, that was the first thing we wanted to get rid of. And so then it's just what path we take. So thank you for the questions and discussion. Are we getting clear? Are there other questions on the amendment side? Representative Riley.
So going back to your amendment, so the figure that you're showing here, the $746 million, that is a figure to pay off a paid down bond debt right now? Is that where that number came from?
So yes, that would pay down just the CAPERS unfunded liability. The 253 goes to pay off the two specific layered payments. So the 253 was used as the calculated number to say this equals the current remaining amount on the layered payments. And since our idea was to move $1 billion to CAPERS, the $1 billion minus the amount to pay off the layered is the remaining amount that goes to the UAL.
So, Mr. Chair, are you, since we're spending other people's money anyway, why do we not increase that amount so that we are completely catching up?
And I would say that could be yet another amendment for us to consider. So I would not say that we couldn't, since I don't have an amendment on the table yet. We've only explained one, but I might ask if we dispatch with this one and how we want to handle the 253, and then continue with further discussion if it would be all right with the representative. Representative Riley?
So then I would like to make since I don't have time to make some kind of a paper amendment, so then I think I'd like to tie up the ends a little bit, and I think the reviser will have to help us with this, so that I would just like to have a substitute motion that we would tie this up a little tighter with some kind of language to make sure that that money that goes into the Department of Ed comes to the right place. And that just could be a sentence, I think, but I'm not sure what that wording would be.
Can I massage the words of your possible amendment to see if you agree with it? That since we don't yet have one, we could just make a motion to amend, which includes the balloon, and then clarifies the language in addition with conceptual language to make clear that the money does return to CAPERS.
So we wouldn't need a substitute motion, is what you're saying?
We wouldn't, only because I didn't have one on the table yet. So, because I was being slow going through the details there. So, and if that is your motion, that is great. And if it is not,
well, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure what those words were that you were trying to put in my mouth.
Well, I wanted to be clear again.
I think the reviser has those magic words he's working on over there.
Well,
you have something to tie this up a little tighter to make sure that the intention is right. And
so I think the biggest thing I wanted to make sure I wasn't putting in your mouth was whether you were moving the basic balloon to start with. So, because the clarifying language is necessary to the balloon, right. If that makes sense. Yes. So to not, if you might hold or withdraw for a moment, I'll take a stab at making a motion, and then we can figure out whether that's where we think we are. I would make a motion that we amend 2561 using the words of the balloon and conceptually asking the reviser to add clarifying language that the $253 million is paid directly to CAPERS once it hits the Department of Education. All right, seconded by Representative Riley. Discussion now on that amendment. Okay. If there is no discussion on that, I would close on the amendment and ask those in favor of the amendment to 2561 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. So we have that amendment on 2561 back on that bill. Possibly a discussion of other things. Whether the number is 746 million or some other number than that, that is still the number that is in the bill. So, other discussion on the bill as amended. Representative Proctor.
Well, Mr. Chair, before I talk, I'd like to make sure there's no other amendments on the floor, but if there's no other amendments. Mr. Chair, I guess I'll call this a pre-explanation of vote before we vote on the bill as amended. I promised people Leavenworth and Fort Leavenworth that I was going to return this $3 billion to them that we've got in surplus as tax cuts. And so the bill as it is right now doesn't do that, so I'm going to vote against the bill. But if this comes to the floor, because I don't have the language ready, there's a lot more research to do. My intention is to bring an amendment that will pull forward the savings as we discussed in the committee hearing so that we start realizing the savings earlier rather than 5 years from now as was testified to in the committee hearing, and then attach to that a tax cut because if we leave $100 million in the hands of the state of Kansas, I am very concerned that it will get spent as opposed to returned to people in the form of tax cuts. I think this is a great way to transform one-time money into every year money that we can return to the people of Kansas because it's not our money, it's their money. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Further discussion? Representative Croft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I renew my motion for the committee to favorably pass House Bill 2561 as amended.
Seconded by Representative Howe. On the motion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Nay. Ayes appear to have it. Representative Proctor would like his no recorded, and the ayes do have it. Anyone else like their vote recorded? Seeing none, thank you for your work on that committee. All right, we are making progress. House Bill 2481 dealt with the chance to for KP&F participants to purchase service credit in certain non-federal government employment. And if the reviser would give us an overview of 2481.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2481 would authorize on and after July 1 of 2022 that a member of KP&F, the Police and Firemen's Retirement System, who was previously employed in in-state non-federal governmental employment, they would be allowed to purchase a KP&F service credit for that in-state non-federal governmental employment service. The member would have to submit proof of that employment to the retirement system in a manner acceptable to the board, and the member would either elect in writing to have additional contributions deducted from the member's compensation until all quarters of that service credit has been purchased, or the member may purchase the credit by means of a single lump sum payment. I will point out the members of CAPERS are currently authorized to purchase this type of service, so this would just be for. This would also allow the KP&F system members to do so.
So thank you for the overview. One of the things that was important to me on these changes flexibility is good, giving our members things that they want is good, and particularly when they are cost neutral, I'm inclined to go that route, and this is designed to be that way. There is one piece of information that I will ask Capers to talk about in terms of the return assumption and that impact and whether there is anything, but I believe we have a question from Representative Riley.
Yes, I think you're going to call up our director, but for the knowledge of the committee, can you bring up how that service credit is determined, whether it is based on the employee's contribution or the full 31% or whatever that is that it would have been from the employee and the employer's contribution to make a year's credit? Thank you.
And if that's a question better suited for Capers than the revisor, we can defer it to them. So if that's acceptable, Director Conroy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I may have Jared Waltner respond to this. He's been working with our actuary this afternoon to get an answer to this question. I was involved in some other things. So if Jared Waltner, our planning and research officer, could respond. He's got, I think, the latest information from our actuary.
That'd be great. So, Jared, if you would start with Representative Riley's question, and then we'll go into some of the other homework that you may have been doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the way that the service purchase is calculated is the actuary looks at what the potential benefit will be for that member, and then they calculate a present value of that benefit, and they just subtract the present value of what it would be without the service purchase to what it would be with the service purchase, and that's the actuarial cost, the difference between those two numbers. And so then they have to pay whatever that cost is, and that can be based off of their future contributions. They can do it on a quarter-for-quarter basis, or they can do it all at once in a lump sum. So it's not based purely on how much they're contributing, but how much the potential benefit will be based on the additional service years they're purchasing.
So again, that's not based on a year's of an employee's contribution, or it's not based on a year of what the employer and the employee would have contributed dollar. It's another factor completely.
Correct.
And how do you determine that benefit factor?
So the actuary assumes that the member will retire when they're first eligible to retire. That's generally when, on an actuarial calculation, the benefit is the most expensive, when they're the youngest that they can retire with unreduced benefits. So based on, most people don't purchase it when they're, 20 or 30 years old. It's usually when they're closer to retirement. So they'll take whatever parameters are closest to their normal retirement. And for KP&F, they can retire at age 50 if they have 25 years of service, age 55 with 20 years of service, or age 60 with 15 years of service. So whichever one would trigger based on the purchase of the service, they will calculate what the value of that benefit is, and then they'll compare it to the value of their nearest benefit without making the service purchase. And the difference between those two numbers is the actuarial cost, and that's what the member has to pay.
Thank you. Other questions, if you want to just hang loose if we're right back to you. Other questions for anyone to the revisor or Capers? I had a question, and that related to the fact that we heard early in the session that we might be reducing the return assumption inside Capers. And if I reduce the return assumption, that would increase the cost to a member purchasing service credit, I believe. And I had asked if there was any information you might have on the degree of that we did not have in the hearing. And I had an amendment drawn up if that was a material number. For example, if today the rate of return is 7 3/4, and I purchase my service, and in a year the return assumption is 7%, I got a bargain, right? So wanted to look at, since that discussion was pending, how that might impact. Were you able in the minutes that I gave you to come up with any useful information?
Yes, we did talk to the actuary, and she was able to run some calculations based on two different investment return assumptions, one at 7 3/4, which is our current assumption, and one at 7%, which is hasn't been selected, but it's just something that's lower than 7.75 for example. And so you are correct that when the investment return assumption is lower, the cost for service purchases increases because at the time that they retire, the amount of that benefit, you have to have more cash on hand, essentially, if you don't think you're going to earn as much every year that the member is retired. So the cost of that additional benefit goes up. So when we compared the two, we had two different scenarios because clearly it's affected greatly by how old the member is and how much they're purchasing and whether or not that purchase makes them retirement eligible or just adds some additional service years on. All of those factors play in. So we looked at two of the more common instances. One where a member just purchases some service that they have that it will increase their benefit, but it doesn't make them eligible to retire any earlier. And then another scenario where a member purchases service that actually makes them retirement eligible at a younger age because they pass over one of those service and age breakpoints that I said for KPNF. So if you're looking at just purchasing the service for additional service years, but you don't change when they actually retire, we expect them to have, the same parts of the benefit formula. So they have the same years of service, they have the same multiplier and the same final average salary. The only difference is then the years of service that they purchase. So if a member was to purchase 3 years of service at 7.75%, but they still retire at the same age, on this example, the cost of that service purchase was about $61,000. If it had been 7% instead of 7.75, the cost was about $67,000. So there's about a $6,000 difference between the calculated cost. And so if they purchased it at 7.75 and the plan eventually ends up expecting to only earn 7, then we would have under-calculated the cost of that benefit because of the higher investment return assumption by about $6,000. So just as a point of reference, the unfunded liability of the KPNF plan is about $1 billion, $1.5 billion. I don't have my valuation in front of me, but so it'd be about $6,000 compared to the overall unfunded liability over $1 billion. So it's very small on an individual basis. In addition, this group is not expected to be hundreds or thousands of people making these purchases. At this time, we know of only one who is interested in making this kind of purchase. I mean, it could expand some, but it's not going to expand to thousands of people. So, that's up to you to judge the impact of that and how important it is to address that for the system. On the other scenario where a member actually purchases service so that they can become retirement eligible earlier, it's not quite as intuitive and there's several moving parts. Essentially, the member ends up with a lower benefit because they retire earlier, and so their final average salary comes down because the expectation is that they'll continue to progress in salary over time. So if they work longer, they would be expected to have a higher final average salary. So they end up with a slightly smaller benefit, but because they can retire earlier, it's being paid over a larger number of years, and so the present value of that cost is higher. But in that scenario, the difference between the calculations is much lower. It's about $1,500 is the difference between the calculations instead of when they were just purchasing additional service years without changing their retirement age, it was about $6,000. So it would be different for every individual member. There's no way to sort of come up with a rubric so that you can look at it. It depends greatly on the individual demographics of each member, but there is some cost. It is limited, and the pool of people eligible to make this service purchase is also limited. So
thank you. So in the first case, it would be about 10% of the cost difference, and in the second case, where we're still looking at $60,000-ish with a $1,500 difference.
No, it was higher. In that scenario, the person had to purchase 5 years instead of the 3 years, and that was about $120,000. So that would be about $22,000 per year purchased, compared to about $20,000 per year purchased. I mean, it's not a huge difference between the per year cost that they're purchasing, but
then it was a $1,500 difference between the 7.75 and the 7% against the 120. So I was looking at a 1% difference essentially in that scenario and a 10% difference in the first scenario.
Yes.
So thank you. That helps to get a handle on the size of that issue. So committee, my question to that was, I believe it is cost neutral as presented if investment assumptions stay the same. Not knowing how big that was and wishing to stay cost neutral, there is a balloon amendment that is drawn to say the person could purchase service after that change is implemented at whatever it is. We could look at that and figure out how to make that happen and truly be cost neutral, or we can say for X number of dollars against the system, we may or may not be particularly worried about that. So I'm happy to walk through that amendment to put it on the table for consideration. Representative Neighbor. True, we have not done that. So if you would like to make that motion, that would be great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we pass out House Bill 2481, favorable for passage.
Motion by Representative Neighbor, seconded by Representative Topliker. So, thank you. Now we have it on the table, and does anybody want to go down that path of figuring it out, or do you think it's a small enough number to skip? Small enough? Anybody disagree? All right, I think you can throw that amendment away. So, thanks for your work on that. Is there any further discussion on 2481? If there's no further discussion, Representative Neighbor, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is something that KPNF has been working on or looking at for several years. And with that, I move that we pass out House Bill 2481, favorable for passage.
You've heard the motion to pass House Bill 2481 favorable by Representative Neighbor, seconded by Representative Topliker. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it, ayes do have it, and the motion passes, as does House Bill 2481. If you guys can hang with me, let's try to at least do one more, and that would be House Bill 2110, requiring the insurance coverage for the Pandas bill, if the reviser would give us an overview of that bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2110, this would require the state healthcare benefits program to implement coverage for the diagnosis and prescribed treatment of pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome, or PANS, and pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders associated with streptococcal infections, also known as PANDAS. And the bill, as introduced, would have been in plan year 2022. This is a 2021 bill that's been carried forward. And pursuant to the test track statute, KSA 40-2249A, on or before March 1 of 2023, the Kansas State Employees Healthcare Commission would submit a report regarding the mandated coverage for PANS and PANDAS to the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House as it was provided during plan year 2022. The report would contain the impact the mandated coverage had on the state healthcare benefits program, data on the utilization for coverage of PANS and PANDAS, and the cost of the coverage, and a recommendation of whether the mandated coverage would continue for the state healthcare benefits program or whether additional data would be required. At the next legislative session, following receipt of the report, the legislature may consider whether or not to require PANS and PANDAS coverage be mandated for all for health insurance plans on and after July 1 of 2024. Like I said, this was a 2021 bill, so obviously we're in plan year 2022 now, so that would have to be updated.
So questions for the reviser? If there are no questions, I might recognize Representative Croft for a motion, or did you have a question or motion?
It's a motion, but it doesn't matter.
So Representative Croft, I think you had some comments.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Real quick, and I appreciate you guys indulging me for just a second. Remember, I did a big presentation on this last time, and you guys asked some great questions. During the hearing and after, there were several comments that were made on the process, and we wish we could just jump right to the end. And last year, as we went through, just as a reminder, we talked about identifying the issue. We conducted an in-depth cost analysis. Then we tested on the employee state health plan. And then we make a decision at the end if we're going to make this a mandate. And understanding that when we do these mandates, it potentially has the impact of raising insurance premiums and everything. But again, what the process does is it helps us make a conscious decision as we go through that, which is, I think, is really important. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong, just that we're doing it. The requester has identified a problem, created a solution, and they have conducted an in-depth analysis because we asked them to do that last year. And so I'm excited that they've done that. Now they're coming back and asking us to apply this to the state employee health plan, see how much the actual cost is going through that, and then we'll come back again and do that next step. I do want to commend our conferee. Her testimony was really powerful for me because she provided us and put us into the situation she was going through. And it reminds me a lot of times, you could tell it was painful, but it reminds me a lot of times, and especially in our background, working with the Medal of Honor recipients, many times they're asked, hey, talk to them about your experience. It's the most gruesome experience they have to go through. And people ask them all the time. And we've asked our conferee to come in here several times now and do that exact same thing. So I want to thank her publicly for coming in here and providing that testimony, but showing us also that real impact that that situation had on her, her family, and what that means to us as we're trying to make a decision. If you'll remember, I asked the representative from Atchison, what happens if nothing happens, like if we don't do anything? And it's a long-term impact. It's over $1,000 a day for the rest of their life. It's an impact where the family's no longer productive fully to the community, and neither is that individual. So you can't put the money on that, but I mean, just understand that there's a lot out there. There's no guarantees that this will solve the problem, but there is the option, and it gives us the understanding of what we're going to do when we make that decision. I want to thank the representative from Atchison for his dedication to the cause and his willingness to understand the process and drive us through that. But I believe what we have to do and what we're doing is the blend of the art and the science and the solution. This bill is asking us in that next step in the overall process to address the statute and asks us to do a 2-year analysis, which is why we're going to have to do a date change in here, and that'll be an amendment we'll ask for in a minute, and then make a final decision of whether we're going to apply this as a state mandate. Fair enough. I think that's great. And I want to thank the committee, and I want to thank the chair for indulging me for my comments. And I want to thank everybody in this whole process. It's been really moving for me. With that, Mr. Chair, I move the committee recommend House Bill 2110 favorably for passage.
Motion by Representative Croft, seconded by Representative Neighbor. Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think sometimes we look at these things just maybe from the dollar perspective. But I can say that this research shows, or the information that we've been provided, this is a very minimal cost. But when you look at the cost to the families who have children with this issue, if you don't catch it early on, it only gets worse. Those treatments are IV treatments, and they're very, very costly. And maybe for some, it might require 1 year, might require 2 a year. But for those that are diagnosed later, this can be a lifelong issue. And we need to look at that and say, can we help prevent in the early stage, give peace of mind and help to those families, which is crucial because this can bankrupt them. We need to move forward on this. I too would like to say thank you to the representative from Atchison. Of course, being a physician, I think he knows a little bit, which is good. Mandates are hard when you look at them on insurance for those that are new to this committee. No one takes that lightly. And as our vice chair stated, that's why there's a process, so we don't overdo something or underdo something, or that we understand why we're doing it. And when you go and you speak to your constituents on why their premium went up 2 or 3 cents, which in this case may be what it is, then you can explain that. And you have the ability to compare the challenges that lay ahead for these families. So with that, I second the motion. And this is something that we've worked on for several years, and I'm pleased that we've gotten to this point. So thank you.
Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if this is a question for you or for the vice chair, or if anybody wants to jump on it and answer the question. So projecting forward, we go through this 2 years plus that it's in the state employee health care plan. Who are we? What insurance plans are we and are we not able as a legislature to mandate for? Are there going to be some health plans like Medicare or Medicaid that we're not able to mandate this for, or any private insurances that would be exempt from this after we've gone through this whole process?
So thank you. I might look to research on that question in terms of who and how and any other next step in that process that we look at.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Proctor. The way that the health insurance mandates are set up, it makes it very clear which plans would not apply. And so generally, these will apply to group insurance, individual plans that are subject to state law. So any supplemental plan, like a vision plan, a disability insurance would not qualify. Medicare would not qualify. Medicaid would not qualify. Those would not be plans subject to state law. Self-insured plans are the largest ones. Those are your ERISA plans, there are also plans that are outside the jurisdiction of the insurance commissioner, which are association health plans and business entity plans.
And so this is almost certainly a completely unfair question, and I'm going to throw at you anyways. Do you have any sense for like the percentage of Kansans that are not going to be impacted in any way by a mandate?
We have heard in testimony that number for the plans that would be subject to could be between 25 and about 30%. Would be for individuals covered. I will note this is for children, so that may be a different range than it may be for adults seeking coverage in Kansas.
And then, Mr. Chair, if you'd indulge me, my final rookie question for this bill, potentially. How many children, do you have any idea how many children are covered in the state health plan that we're going to be impacting today?
So that number was estimated in the Siegel report. So the Siegel report takes a total number of 11,904 children between the ages of 3 and 14, applies a prevalence count of 60. And then if we have a slightly higher enrollment, like children that would be slightly older, then it would make that number, for those, that'd be the total estimated annual. If it's a lower prevalence percentage, that may be as low as 18. It would depend on the type of treatment that the child required.
So the upper end of this, we're spending a whole bunch of money on those kids. And I absolutely hate to be even mentioning money. I mean, the testimony was so compelling, but I just wanted to try to get a order of magnitude analysis there. So thank you.
Representative Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since I first came in to the House, I was on Health and Human Services Committee at one time, and we heard a lot about this subject there. And then, of course, in this committee, we've heard about it a couple times. And I mean, I'm as much as I say I've heard about it, I'm far from being an expert, but I do believe that the time has come where that this bill be passed and that the trial take place in the state health plan, and then if everything goes well, to pass it on to the other plans that we have jurisdiction over. And like I said, I just think it's a real thing, and there are people out there who need help for it, and I'd just like to see it go to the point to where people can get the help they need. Thank you.
Representative Croft for an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a technical amendment, and I move that that the committee favorably passes this technical amendment, which is basically a date change. As was mentioned in the initial testimony, this was a bill that was done last year. We just need to slide everything by 1 year. Is that correct? Okay.
So there was a motion to amend. Is there a second while it's being passed out? Seconded by Representative Neighbor. And if the reviser will walk through it ever so briefly with us when it's passed out.
Yeah, I believe Representative Croft explained it pretty well. It's just really a technical amendment to update the dates. This was a bill from 2021, so it's pretty hard to get this into the coverage year that we're currently in 2022. So this moves it out a year into the 2023 coverage year for the state employee health plan, and then just requires that report to be made on 2024 versus 2023, then to reflect the experience that would happen in the state employee health plan. And then would extend out on page 2 on the back of the amendment would just say that then the legislature could consider making this available to other health insurance plans on and after July 1 of 2025.
Committee questions for the reviser? Seeing none, discussion on the amendment. Seeing no discussion on the amendment, Representative, you may close on the amendment motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Close.
Heard the motion by Representative Croft to amend House Bill 2110. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes, and we're back on the bill. Discussion or questions on the bill? Representative Miller?
I would move that we recommend House Bill number 2110 favorably as amended.
Motion by Representative Miller, seconded by Representative Croft. With that, we were done with discussion. All those in favor of passing, what's that? You may close.
I just want to say in response to something that the ranking member said earlier, and in no way is this reflective on the representative from Atchison, but just because you have a medical degree doesn't mean you know anything about medicine.
That was the close? Okay. Somewhat related to the bill as well. So thank you. You've heard the motion by Representative Miller to pass House Bill 2110 favorably as amended. Those in favor of passage signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. No. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The bill passes. Would anyone like their vote recorded? Seeing none, thank you, committee. Thank you for working through all of the items that we have. We will not make it through another. We will pick up our work on Monday. Thanks again for your attention to the details. Be safe through the storm, and we will see you when we are back. We're adjourned.